Hello, everyone. Can everybody see my screen? All right. Oh, it's not connecting. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, let's just give a couple more minutes for everybody else to join. Yeah, syllabus. Let's see where we left off. Okay, let's see. All right. Yeah, so let's see. Let's review where we left off and where we're going this week. While other folks join. There's a question. Before we do A2, can we merge A1 into master branch? Even the grade for A1 is not ready. Yeah, so master branch, we're never going to be grading master branch. So it's actually a good practice to merge the latest feature branch once you're done and submitted and ready to continue. It's a good practice to merge the latest feature branch back to the main branch. Although we are not going to be grading the main branch, so it's just a good practice. We're only ever going to look at branches A1, A2, A3, for the individual assignments. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Right, so we have completed the first couple of modules that we introduced the HTML language and web development in general, the course, and we're just learning how to do some rough layout of the content using the simplest HTML elements, tags, right? Using H1, paragraphs, tables, lists, right? Anchors. We were able to implement some simple navigation between various screens, and we also learned how to misuse tables for laying out content horizontally. And we said that the look and feel wasn't that pretty, and that we would come back a little later to revisit that content and make it a little more presentable. And that's what we're going to do this in this module, right? We're going to revisit all that content and fix a few things so that they look more like the intended, the target look and feel, right? That has different colors for the foreground and background. Also, we're going to fix our misuse of tables for laying out things horizontally. Instead, we're going to introduce a grid layout and flex. There's a question in chat. I uploaded my assignment and master branch yesterday. Is it a mistake? That's right. So the reason we have the different branches is so that you can work in the next assignment without worrying of overwriting previous assignments, while TAs are still grading previous ones. So, I mean, that's fine if you submit it to the main branch and that's what you gave us to grade. As long as when you work on assignment 2, work in a separate branch, right? In the A2 branch, so that you don't overwrite whatever it is that the TAs are currently grading, right? So that you don't perturb what is currently there in the repository, what's already deployed in Netlify, and that those give them a chance to grade while you keep working in the next assignment. So that's the intent of having separate branches. Whatever it is that you give us to grade, that's what we're going to grade, right? And as long as you know what you gave us, it represents the work that you've done. Okay. So yeah, so we'll revisit CSS. Also, we're gonna take a look at how to make things responsive, right? So that the content that you create can adapt to various sizes of the screen, right? So that you can the same content can be viewed either on large, wide screens or notebooks or iPads or even phones, right? So yeah, so up to this point, right, all this content is static, right? None of the behavior of adding content or removing or dynamically populating content, things like that doesn't exist yet, right? So for instance, the navigation from the assignments, right, that go into the assignment editor, right, that presumably the behavior would be that if you click on if you select a particular assignment, you would get the editor for that particular assignment, right? And so that can't work until we get to JavaScript, React.js, right? And we know how to manage the life cycle of and state of an application. So we can't do that just yet, right? Not until we get to JavaScript. So we do have the first quiz coming up later this week. So quizzes are always the second lecture, or they're made available the second lecture of whatever week they're supposed to be. So it's this week, and so yeah, Q1. It's going to be all about HTML, right? And I'm going to give you a code snippet, maybe a little input field, and I'll explain the behavior, such as if you hover over it, right, this tooltip appears, right? How do you do that? And it has an initial value of 1, 2, 3. So how do you do that? And when you remove all the content, right, you see this grayed out text that is kind of giving you a hint of what I'm expecting you to type in there. So how do you do that? So yeah. So go over that material. If you've been doing the assignment for the last couple of weeks, then you should be totally fine. Also acronyms, make sure you know your acronyms. What does HTML stands for, URL, HTTP, right, the DOM, right, all these very, very simple things that you should know very, very quickly. Okay. Anyway, that's the plan for the next several weeks. Any question? The assignment is due tonight, right? And we do need from you 2 links, right? One is the link to your GitHub repository, right? Not the .git, right? The URL that navigates to the main or the A1 branch. And the other thing that we need is your application deployed to a Netlify remote server, right? Going to the root, right, of that web application, right? And then which should provide hyperlinks that allow you to navigate everywhere else, right? This should allow us to navigate to the various exercises in the first assignment, as well as the Canvas application, right? Navigate to the profile, to the home screen, to the grades, the assignments, right? Yeah. So yeah, so that's due later tonight. Anything else? Any questions? All right. Yeah, so let's take a look at the material for this week. So yes, we finished the first week, so let's take a look at CSS. All right. So yeah, so first let's discuss what is CSS. Right? So let's see. Okay, so what is CSS? So CSS, first of all, stands for Cascading Style Sheet, right? And it's an entirely new language, just like HTML, it's its own language. CSS, it's an entirely different language, and they are somewhat related. The HTML, the purpose of HTML is to describe the rough layout of the content, right? And some rough formatting that things are somewhat, there are lists, there are tables, there are paragraphs, there are headings, and creates a hierarchy of the document that you want to display on screen. And whereas CSS is meant for overriding the default look and feel that browsers use to render those screens, right? So every browser has a standard default style that uses to render headings and paragraphs and lists and tables, right? And it's standard. So presumably it should render the same in Chrome as in Safari, right? As in Firefox. They should all render the same. The same document should render the same. And so in that default styling, it says that the font is black and the background is white. The font is Times New Roman. That the default size of regular text is 16 pixels. That the headings are 2 or 3 times as big as the normal text, and they're bold. Right? So all these are given by the default style sheet that browsers all have. And CSS is learning all about how we can go and override that default style so that it looks more customized, or something that looks more that what we want it to look like, right? So and the way it works is by configuring, right, a particular style property, right, of the various tags and DOM elements, right, that are used to then render to the screen, right? So for instance, here we have an example of a paragraph, right, that will end up as a node in the DOM, right, that we are overriding, that that even though the default is to render black on white, here we're overriding the color, the foreground color, and we're saying that we should be green, right? And so now everything, all the text that is inside of the paragraph now is going to render foreground green. And the way we do that is by using one of 3 ways, right? The simplest way, but the wrong way, is to use the style attribute, right? So every paragraph, every element, every tag has this style attribute that allows you to type in here, right, a CSS statement, right? A statement that says that so-and-so property has so-and-so value, right? And so and there's tons of properties. Here is the foreground color, there's a background color. You can set the size of the fonts. You can say that it renders horizontally, vertically. You can rotate it, right? You can do all sorts of things. You can justify to the right, justify to the left. And so part of learning CSS is learning what properties you can change, right? And the proper values to set it to, right? So yeah, so that's part of the CSS, learning CSS, right? What properties are there that I can change, right? And the appropriate values that I can give it. So the second way is to not use the style attribute, but instead move all those transformations, all those properties and values, move them to a dedicated style tag. So there's a style tag where you can collect all these transformations, all these settings, right? Instead of applying them to individual tags, you can collect all those, right, and dump them all and collect them, group them into a style tag, there's a single style tag, right? But then we broke the application, right? Because here it is clear that this style of green is being applied, specifically to this paragraph, right? So it's obvious, right? It's being applied to that paragraph. But if you move it all up to the style tag, then it's not obvious, right? That this center or right or left or right or justification, which one does it apply to, right? So when you move it up here, you have to now explicitly say, right, what the transformation is for which elements. And the way we do that is by providing the here on the left side of this rule, right, of this statement, is a symbol that allows you, or an expression that allows you to associate these transformations, right, with the element that is applicable to, right? So here we're saying that all paragraphs are aligned center. I could have put here aligned center, color green, right, background yellow, blah, 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 a whole bunch of collection of transformations of styling properties and their values, group them all in a semicolon separated list. So it could be a list of multiple properties that you want to change. You can group them together with a curly bracket and then apply it to a specific element or multiple elements. Here, we're applying these transformations, right, to all paragraphs. So any paragraph in this in the DOM, we will apply these transformations. Make sense? So you might ask, well, which one should I use? Does it matter, right? Could I use a combination of both? So as a good practice, we would avoid using the style attribute and go in favor of declaring that in a central way, right? That you can then reference the DOM tags and the DOM nodes, right, in the DOM data structure, and then apply to those DOM elements like that, as opposed to directly using style on the element. And the reason is it's a software engineering reason, right? That if you're talking about here in academia or amongst yourselves, in a conversation, then sure, right? You're talking maybe about just one file, right? Maybe just a code snippet. Then, whether you do one or the other, it doesn't really matter, right? Whether you use style attribute or the style tag, or as we'll see in a minute, the link, it doesn't really matter. But if you are in a development setting, in an industry, you're part of a team of several dozen folks, right? Where you have other designers and architects and subject matter experts, right? That are looking over your shoulder. You're looking at your code, and your code is going to go into production. Is going to go through code review, and folks are going to critique your code, right? Then do not use the style attribute, right? Instead, use this other alternative. And the reason is that if you use the style attribute, well, typically you're going to have a lot of copy and pasting, right, over and over, so because, right, if you're part of a team and if you're part of a product of a large corporation, typically there'll be designers, right, that have come up with a custom look and feel for the entire website, the branding and the marketing, right, and they want maybe a consistent look and feel across the entire website, right, in the corporate enterprise, so all paragraphs should look the same, all headings should look the same. So for instance, you might find yourself that all paragraphs should have a color green. And so if you use the style attribute, you'll find yourself copying and pasting that style over and over and over, right, in the hundreds, thousands of paragraphs, right, in the enterprise. And so if tomorrow the enterprise wants to change a marketing strategy, or it's launching a new branding, right, and wants to change this to blue or yellow, now you have a very hard maintenance problem that you're going to have to go back and change every single style, color, from green to blue or orange or whatever, right? And you have to change it in thousands of places, right? So a slightly better solution is to instead, declare it in a single place, right? Like a style. Let's see the question in the chat. If we apply embedded in the HTML and apply to an HTML element, will the second one override the first one? So yeah, that's a great question, right? The style attribute has the last say, right? Because you could have conflicts of multiple expressions like this that are both targeting the same elements, the same DOM. And one legitimate question is that, well, how do you resolve conflicts? So for instance, this P might be saying that the color should be red, but the style is saying that the color should be green. So which one is it? Is it green or is it red? A general rule of thumb is that last one wins, right? Or the declaration, a configuration that is closest to the element has the last say, right? So if style here says color green, but this says P color red, then it would be green, right? Because the style is the closest, right? You're right on the element telling it that you need to be green, right? Never mind those farther away, right? Yeah, so the latest one overrides the previous, correct. But also there's other rules, not only that one. There's several other rules that compete that the browser uses to calculate the relevance of one rule versus another rule, right? And for instance, one we'll see a little later is the how unique or how special this left-hand side expression is, right? So for instance, if you say all paragraphs, like here we're saying all paragraphs, right? So here, what this left-hand side of this statement does, right? This is an expression on the left side that is used like a regular expression, right? That is used to select, right, or do a pattern matching on the DOM to determine which elements is this look and feel applied to, right? Who's going to be green and who's going to be red? Well, the left side is a regular expression that says, hey, all the paragraphs, right, or only the line items that are inside of unordered lists that have a particular ID that are inside of a paragraph that is below the third heading, right? So the DOM data structure, right, has a hierarchy, right? Has where you have a root and you have branches and nodes and leaves, right? So this expression is used to walk those nodes, right? To select all the nodes in the DOM and say, these 3 nodes, I want them to be green, right? And these 4 over here, I want them to be yellow, right? So this left-hand side is a regular expression to select, right? And indeed, this left-hand side is referred to as the selector, right? Selecting which elements am I targeting, right? To transform the look and feel on the right-hand side. That makes sense? So when you have rules that are conflicting, right, that one regular expression says that these nodes are red, and then you have another regular expression that says these nodes should be green, and you have a conflict where you have some nodes that are being told to be green and the same nodes are being told to be yellow. Well, which one wins? Well, one of the rules is that the closest one wins, but also, if you look at the regular expressions, the more generic ones have lower priority, and the ones that are more specific, right, have a higher priority. Okay, so that also is used to calculate, right, how to resolve these conflicts. And we will have some examples of that, and the assignment has a couple of exercises and that are are designed for you to practice this notion of conflicts resolution. Okay, excellent question. So this approach of using the style tag is slightly better than using the style attribute, so that if you're if in this particular screen, this particular document, you have a couple hundred paragraphs, then instead of having to use this style a couple hundred times, you can just declare it once in the style attribute, right? This is per page, right? This style is per page. And now, what if you have dozens of pages, or you have hundreds of pages? You still would have to go and have this style copied and pasted in multiple, dozens or hundreds of pages, right? That still is a lot of work. So this too is considered to be bad practice. Don't use style attribute, don't use style tags. Again, unless it's a throwaway piece of code or something trivial. But by far the best thing to do is to declare a separate file, right, where you have a CSS file and you put in there all your expressions, right, your regular expressions and your transformations. And then what you have is the dozen or so or hundreds of pages. They're going to all link that file, right? Link it as a style sheet, right? And then all pages are using the same CSS files, right? Some are used to override specific pages, perhaps, so that now the maintenance is much easier, right? You only have to manipulate or modify just a few CSS files, right? And boom, you can target the entire look and feel of an entire application, an entire website, right? Overnight. Make sense? Right? Some of the good best practices. All right, so let's take a look at all those three, right? So in this case, we have these three paragraphs, and they're all misusing the style attribute to change the background color to be yellow. This one's saying the background color to be blue and the foreground color to be white. Now you can specify multiple look and feel properties, right? Like the background color and the foreground color, and you can separate it by using the semicolon, right? This one is using background color red and then foreground color white, right? Now, a better way to do that, instead of applying it directly on the elements, the best way to do that instead is to declare, right, those transformations. You can declare those transformations, right, in the style attribute or even in the CSS file, and then use those transformations, and then use some rules on the left side to apply those transformations to the target elements. So in this case here, notice that instead of P, the paragraphs having the style, right, having the style attributes, here what we've done instead is that we have named these transformations. We have given them names, right? So for instance, just like you would declare a variable name or a function name, these also are names that we choose. Let's see, is a question in the chat. Is a CSS file still just written in HTML? No, not HTML. It's its own language, right? It's a CSS language, this language right here. CSS is all about creating these types of statements where you have on the left side, you have the selectors, right? And then on the right side, you have the transformations, right? So you have the selectors are saying, hey, these are the nodes in the DOM which I am targeting. And then on the right-hand side, these are the things I want you to do, right? Change the background or the foreground or the font size or the bold or blah, 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 right? So CSS is all about learning what properties can you change, and then how to target the DOM elements, right? So for instance, this one is targeting. This is targeting. Notice the period here in front. See that? So that's saying that I am targeting all elements that have a class, equal to background yellow. So that means that this paragraph, because it has that class of background yellow, which I named, we're going to apply these transformations, right? The background color would be yellow, right? And this can be applied to any elements, any tag that has the class background yellow. Doesn't need to be a paragraph. I can apply it to a table, or I can apply it to a paragraph, a heading, right? I can set the class to be background yellow, right? And then I can start painting stuff with the background yellow, right? And here's another one that does a background blue. Let's see a question in the chat. Is this like instance in object-oriented programming? Yeah, exactly. So this, perhaps that's why it's called class, right? So you're creating this class that you're declaring these properties, these values, right? And then you apply those transformations to individual instances, right, of elements that are now all part of this collection, right? Part of this family, part of this classification, this class, right? So for instance, this is the paragraph is background yellow. So that means this paragraph is part of the group of elements that have the same class. Yep. So yeah, that's that you could use that same analogy. Now you can apply multiple classes to an element, right? Just like you can have an object, right, or a class inherit from multiple classes, where you might have multiple inheritance, right? Or friends in C++, right? So here we are taking both classes, right? The background blue class here with a period, and which makes the background blue, but we're also here inheriting or applying the properties, right, of the color white, right, which is here, which is changing the foreground to be white, right? So it's kind of like a combination of both sets of properties which get collated, right, and both transformations are being applied to this particular paragraph, right? And this one combines red, white on red, right? So I'm grabbing this white and this red, and I'm combining them into both a foreground color of white and a background color of red, applied to this particular paragraph. Make sense? Right. Yeah. So first we did it using style, right? We use style. Second, we use the style tag. So this is a style attribute. Then we did it using the style tag, which is slightly better. Right? And then by far the best option is to move all these, all this code, right? Instead of having it here in the style tag, move it into a separate file, the style.css, and where we can we have the same exact code, but we're going to link that file from our HTML, right? And then and say it's a style sheet. Okay. So that makes sense. Right? Let me demonstrate. Right? So for instance, we have here, actually, let me close this. And so new, and so we are 5610 fall 23. Yep. And let's see, we have a git branch on main, and so let's go to git checkout A1 and git checkout -b A2. Right, and so let's play around with CSS, right? So for instance, under here, let's create a directory and call it lecture. Right, and let's talk about CSS. And here we were showing you the example of a file in here, so index.html. and we had just a few paragraphs. So here we have H1, well, introduction to CSS, right? And let's do an npm start, and let's navigate there. Perhaps on their index, let's create a link so we can navigate there. So we can say create here lectures, and let's create a URL so we can navigate to there. And let's navigate to lectures, and then say CSS, and then index.html. And let me rename this. In lectures, I like better, lectures, plural. And this hyperlink, right, we'll say CSS lecture. Okay. And so let's navigate there. There we go. So we go navigate. So introduction to CSS, right? So in here, I might have several paragraphs, right? So we say P, and then it says lorem ipsum. Okay, there we go. So we got one paragraph. We can have another paragraph. A couple paragraphs. And so we can target them. And we can do it directly here, saying that I want the background color to be red. Right, so I can target directly on the element, or ideally, right, this is a proper HTML, right? Right, this is a proper HTML document, which we can't totally skip, right? So then we have the head, right? And we have the body, and like that. So like that's a proper HTML document. But instead of declaring it here, right, in the head, right, we can declare a style like that, and say that this paragraph here, we can say P, we can say background red, and so we don't need this here. We remove that like that, right? So, but this one is saying that all paragraphs background are red, right? So if I refresh, notice that indeed all paragraphs are indeed red now, right? And so, and I can be a little more specific and say, oh, well, only the paragraphs whose, say, ID, right, is lorem, right? So I can say, so if I give this a unique identifier, and I say lorem or lorem1, and then I can target and say, well, the paragraphs whose ID is lorem1. Right, so now only the first one's being targeted. Right, and I can do for the second paragraph, I'm saying blue. So I'm going to refresh. Notice that this one is saying that all paragraphs are blue. This one is saying that this particular paragraph is red. Right. So this one's saying that all of them are blue, but this one's saying that this specific one is red. So, and notice that which one won? Well, the red one, even though, right, the paragraph here is declared later. So remember, we said the last one wins. But this one won because notice if I remove that, now they're both blue. You know, because this one is declared later, so the later one wins. So the order matters, right? So this one red is going to win over the blue one, right? And because it's declared later one wins. But if you make things more explicit or more specific, like saying lorem1, that's much more specific, because paragraphs is very generic. It says, well, all paragraphs. That means that, you know, if I have 100 paragraphs, then they're all going to be red, right? But because this is specific, right, it overrides the even the rule that says last one wins, right? So there, so I have and I can you know, configure not just that one property, but I can also configure the color, right, to be white. right? And so they get combined, right, to be applied to that. Both properties are being applied, right, to that particular paragraph. Make sense? Right. So hash allows you to target ID. The name of the name of the tag, right, is used, to target by the name. Let's see, there's a question in the chat. Does the style block for the file always go in the head? Yes. And must there be at most one style? Yes, only one style tag per HTML document, right? So the proper thing to do is not even have the style tag. Instead, is to have a dedicated CSS file, index.css, and just move this instead of here, move it into a separate CSS file. This is the proper thing to do, right? And not even have the style tag at all. Instead, link that document and say, link the style sheet, the file, index.css. Okay? And notice that it works the same way. It works as I'm refreshing. Make sense? Okay. Yeah, so this is the proper thing to do, not the style attribute, not the style block tags, right? But instead a separate CSS file. Now these CSS files, typically there will be a global style sheet, right? Where there might be a global style sheet like styles.css that declares transformations that are applicable across the entire website, right? And so then every page would load the style, right? And so these are the generic styles and transformations and look and feel that are applicable across all the entire website, right? So all the screens would all the HTML documents would load this style sheet, but then you would have additional CSS files that would be optional, and that would be specific to a particular document, right? That that document might have very specific look and feel, some very customized marketing particular page, right? And so you would also load that that CSS that is specific to that screen. Make sense? Right. And in here, you can override styles that were declared in the more generic styles that are more universal. Make sense? Okay. So CSS is all about learning, how do we write these rules here on the left side, these regular expressions on the left side, and learning about all the various properties that we can modify, right, in all the different values. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Let's talk about some really simple styling. Right, we can change the foreground to the color we want. Right, we can change the background. We saw that already. There's some vestige tags, right, that have been around for a while, right, from the beginning of HTML when Tim Berners-Lee was coming up with this, right? So this was pre-CSS, right? And so he had come up with some tags that were used for styling, like making text bold or italic, right, or underline, or centering content in the middle of the screen, right, or also putting content in a table column, align it to the top, right? All this is from way back when he was coming up with all this, and there was no CSS yet, right? Today we tend not to use these tags anymore, right? But they're still there, right? You can still bold some text with the B tag. The I is for italic, but this has fallen so out of favor that people don't use this anymore, that there's some libraries that have kind of like taken over or redefine what I means. For instance, Font Awesome uses the I tag for icons, right? To draw a small snippet of images. You can also change the font weight, if you want bold or light. Yeah, you can change the font family. You can set the size, right? So for instance, you can change that particular paragraph. You can change the font size, right, to be 30 pixels. So normally pixels, and here we've made it almost twice as big. And you can change the font family, right? There's Courier, right? You can change it to remove, make it all the same size, right? Sans serif, monospace, right? You can change it to Arial, right? So there's different families that you can try out. Okay. What else? So here we can declare. Here's a couple examples of declaring these backgrounds or these foregrounds, right? So here we can declare them maybe in the styles, right? We can declare these global classes, right? We call them utility classes, meaning these are kind of like abstractions, like you would declare a function that abstracts a set of algorithms or steps that allow you to generate or transform some data structure, right? So same thing here, right? We are declaring these names that we came up with, right, out of our own choice, presumably negotiating or asking for feedback from fellow developers, right, in our team, and came up with this naming convention, right? For instance, FG foreground color, and then the name of the a name for a color, right? And white, blue, blah blah blah. And the actual values, again, perhaps based on some feedback or brainstorming amongst the team and coming up with this color scheme, right? So once we declare these classes, we can go and the styles is here. We are loading it, right? We're linking to it, and then we can apply these. Right? We can say, let's see. So we can apply it to this heading. We can say, class, and we can make the foreground to be green. Right? So if I refresh, notice that indeed it changes to green, right? So I can declare these classes that I can then go and then start painting my screen, right? And we can declare a few others like backgrounds, right? So let's declare these in colors and declare them in the styles. Put them in the styles because it's kind of like a more global, generic utility classes, right? That would not be particular to any one screen, right? They can be used in multiple screens, right? So for instance, here I'm declaring multiple background colors: yellow, blue, red, and green, right? And then I can go and just apply these, right? For instance, if I go and I want to apply the class to be, BG blue, right? And then I refresh, then I'm setting that color, right? Or maybe let's use yellow. There we go. Right, so green on yellow. Okay. Does that make sense? Right. So notice that these classes can be combined, right, to take all those transformations and apply them to different elements, right? So this is somewhat of a architectural debate that is going on in the CSS community. That how do we name this? How do we choose these names? And there's two big camps that are fighting it out, right? One camp says that you should declare, you should use names here that are define the role of the content, right? So for instance, one camp will say that don't use that, don't use this, or for instance, let me try to recreate this. Let me recreate this, right? So this is another one. Every time again, H1, a introduction to CSS. So the alternative, right? The alternative implementation. So you have these two, right? One camp says declare a whole bunch of utility classes, and then use those utility classes to combine them to achieve your target results. The other camp on the other extreme says no. Instead, right, name this for what the role of this content is. This is a heading, right? So give it a name, main CSS heading. Okay, so that's a meaningful name of what the role of this content is. Yeah, it's the main heading, right? And so, and then go in your CSS files, right? And so, and when you declare your CSS, it says, what color did you want? You want it to be green on yellow? Well, then do that here, right? The color is green, right? Oops. Huh? It says that I've been signed out. This is green, right? And then the background color is yellow, right? And so the results is the same, right? That you have green over yellow, right? So now there's this huge debate on whether we should do it one way or the other. So you'll find libraries, CSS libraries, that follow a particular philosophy or another philosophy, right? Where you have these roles that combine multiple transformations into one single class, right? Or you have in the other camp where you have all these utility classes that you then combine to build the look and feel. I'm not taking any sides. Tailwind, the Tailwind library, which I encourage you to explore, Tailwind, okay, is all about creating these classes where you put a whole bunch of classes together, and you combine them, right, to achieve your look and feel. Whereas you have Bootstrap, which is the one we're going to be using, follows the kind of like a middleman, or it's trying to be happy with both sides, right? So, for instance, it declares these classes, right, that kind of describe what the intent is, right, of the role of this contents to be a list, right, as opposed to a table, or as opposed to whatever, a bullet list or whatever, right? And then the roles of each one of the items. Whereas Tailwind is all about these smaller utility classes, right, that can be combined to achieve your look and feel. So to be able to achieve this same look and feel, then Tailwind would combine classes such as for highlighting it, for applying the border colors, the margins, the padding, the rounding of the corners, right? And so you have to combine all these classes to achieve these look and feel. Okay. Anyway, there's pros and cons in both sides, right? Bootstrap does have also some utility classes as well, and we'll visit some of them. So again, it tries to hit that sweet middle ground between these two opposing philosophies. All right, so yeah, so we have these background colors and foreground colors that we just defined. Oops. And then we used some examples of that. Now the browser needs to calculate, right, where things are going to fall on the screen, right? And so what it does is it tries to compute a rectangular area for every piece of content that gets rendered on the screen, right? So for instance, here, if you inspect this, you'll see that every node on the DOM, right, is represented on the screen by some rectangular elements, right? And so this UL is this big list, right? That it, finishes, finishes here, right? It's that rectangular area. If you go further up, right, the rectangular area is bigger and bigger. If you go down, right, the rectangular area is smaller and smaller, right, all the way to the individual character, right? So if you keep going down, right, we are talking about individual elements, right, texts and whatnot. Okay. So the way it decides where these rectangles end up, right? It needs to know the XY position. It needs to know how wide, how tall, and whatnot. So it uses to calculate the position what is called the box model, right? So every single piece of rectangular content on the screen, and if you scroll all the way down, right, you'll see that is calculating, right, the space between the elements, right, called the margin, deciding whether it needs to draw a particular border around the content, then inner white space, between the border and the actual content, and then the actual content, right? And so together, right, the margins, the borders, the padding, and the actual content constitute this rectangular piece of content, right? That ends up on the screen, plus the width, plus the height, plus the position, left, right, top, bottom position, decides, right, where to put stuff on the screen. And we can override that, right? So it has certain criteria that uses to decide where things fall. And which together, this criteria is called the box model. And you can override its behavior, its default behavior, change in the margin, change in the border, the padding, the width, the height, the position, right? But the more you override, the more you own the behavior, right? The more responsibility you have on your own, right? Because the browser is trying to avoid certain things, right? It's trying to avoid, elements kind of like overlapping each other somehow, right? Or having some weird wrapping or some weird scroll bars where there shouldn't be any scroll bars. So it's working towards rendering something pleasant for you. And the more you override the default behavior, the more trouble you could get into, right? So you need to know what you're doing. So here we have a couple examples of a couple of H1s and paragraphs and spans and whatnot. And let's see what we can configure, right? So for instance, we can configure. So first of all, let's paint each one of these elements, yellow, blue, and red, right, by changing the background color and foreground color of all these elements, right? So this is white on red, this is white on blue, and this is black on yellow, okay? So once we've painted this, right, we can now, for instance, in the spans, let's take a look at these spans down below here. Let's introduce first the borders. So the borders allow us to control what the borders are look like, right? Whether they're solid, they're dashed, they can be, little dots, right? You can change also the width, how wide the border. So this is like very thick borders. Let's say it's 10 pixels wide, right? So the width of that border is 10 pixels wide. We're setting it to be solid, right? As opposed to maybe dashed or dotted or beveled. There's a whole bunch of styles for the border style. And then the color green, right? Now, all these properties have different versions, right? You can either have separate properties in individual like this, right? Where you can separately change the style, separately change the width, separately change the size and color. And then you have another version where you can combine all three things into one single statement, right? So instead of having style, width, and color, you can combine this into three values into single property, then you can combine all three properties at once, right? Like solid, 10, width, and green. Same thing with margin as well, right? But also, just like you can split up these individually or combine them, you can also target individual areas of the margin of the padding, right? You can say only the top margin or padding, right? Or the bottom border or the right border or the left border, right? By appending, right, the nomenclature, right? The direction that you're talking about. So for instance, here, we're saying margin right, right? So I can target that individual margin, right? So in here, notice that I've added some space in between, right? Margin kind of like push us off, adds white space in between elements, right? Or I can combine it with a single margin, and this one you can give it either the value, a single value, which is interpreted as, oh, you want the margins to be the same all around, right? So it's 10 pixels all around. The top, the bottom, the left, the right, they're all four, all four margins are 10 pixels, right? Or you can then split it up into individual ones, right? Padding is the inner space, right? So inside the border, whereas margin is the space beyond the border, the padding is the inner space within the border, right? And here we're targeting the padding all around, 10 pixels all around, see that? Whereas over here, we're just targeting some spacing to the left and some spacing to the top. Doing that by saying, padding left and padding top. See that? Pretty cool. Borders can be, you can configure all sorts of things about borders, right? The style can be dashed, dotted, beveled, solid, right? And you can change the, the styles per size, per area, left, up, down, and whatnot, right? So here's examples of using padding top and left and bottom and right, and then just padding all around. You can also configure the roundness of the corners, right, of individual corners, by using the what is called border radius. So border radius, it allows you to say, well, there's a roundness to it, and you can change the radius. The bigger the radius, right, the more rounded it is, right? So much so that if you make these rounded border radiuses to be the width of the whole rectangle, then it renders like a sphere, right? It renders like a circle, right? And maybe that's what you want, right? So you have to be careful though. You can also target individual radius, right, of each corner, right, or an individual corner. So here's I'm targeting the four corners, right, is 30 pixels here, then 0, no radius, then 20, then 50, right? So just it's clockwise setting all those radii. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at size and position. So size and position allow you to configure the size of things, right? And so this is worth playing around with. So let's take a look around these examples. Just copy that, and let's paste it in here in the HTML, and I'll put it here like that. And actually, I don't have background color, do I? I think just I have BG color, right? I have BG. Oh, this is style. Sorry, never mind. Yeah, these are styles. Okay, so what do these render as? Let me see. Refresh. Okay, so we have these two paragraphs, one yellow, one blue. Okay, and let's make this a little bit smaller so you can follow along. And these are the slides. Let's put the slides here on the right-hand side. And let's make this small so you can see the slides. There we go. All right. So we have those two paragraphs. And so you can overwrite the sizes of the paragraphs by setting the width on them, right? So for instance, here I can say that the width is 100 pixels. And if I spell it right, width, and I can change also the width of this paragraph. Right, so now I have shortened the width of the paragraphs. They still behave like divs, right? Even though here I have space. Notice that this didn't come up. Right? So they both are still behaving like block elements, right? Where they add the vertical spacing, right, above and below. Also, they expand on height, right, as much space as they need to fit the content that is inside their bodies, right? That's a typical behavior of divs, of block elements, right? So notice that the browser is working with me, you know, figuring out the height automatically when things just don't fit, right? It grows the height, right, to be able to render the content inside the paragraph. But that's because we overrode only the width. What if we also override the height, right? So we say 80 for one of them and 30 for the other one. So for instance, if you say, you know, height 80 for one and then 30 for the other one, it could be that you don't leave enough space for one or too much for the other. So now we end up with, you know, too much height for one of them, but too little for the other one. So, you know, this is what was the browser was trying to avoid this, right? You know, weird wrapping, weird clipping of content, right? And, you know, adding weird scroll bars, right? Or things overlapping. So the browser is trying to avoid this. And as we start overriding some of the width, the height, the position, right? The margins in the box model, right? We could break things, right? Like this, right? We're clipping that. So it's up to us to decide whether we know what we're doing, right? And whether this was totally intentional. Yeah, I meant to do that. That's exactly what I want, right? I want to clip that. Or if you want to go in and fix it and say, well, no, actually, you know, it's too small. I'll add some scroll bars in there, or maybe I'll let it spill over to, you know, whatever is already there, right? It's up to us to decide that, you know, if we know what we're doing. So yeah, so let's not do that. Let's not override the height. So let's remove that. There we go. Let's put this back the way it was. But let's override something else. How about overriding the position? Right? I can override the position and say that the position of this paragraph is relative, right? And then I can provide left, right, top, bottom attributes, so I can move it and nudge it in any direction, right? So, but based on the criteria of the position being relative. Relative means that, you know, the browser calculated that those are the best position that you should render, right? But relative allows us to say, okay, well, all right, fine. You're telling me to be here, but I want to nudge a little bit to the right or to the left from, you know, relative to the position where I would have ended up anyway, right? So if this is left, right, and then we refresh, notice that it moves, and I think it was meant to be applied to the one below here, like that, right? So let's refresh. There it is. So we nudged, right, the one of the paragraphs to the right-hand side by 20 pixels, which is fine. Nothing is happening, right? It looks like it's indented. Right? But what if I also set the bottom and say I want you to move from the bottom, I want you to move up by 50 pixels, right? So now notice what I did. Oh no, right? This is something that the browser was trying to avoid, right, of things wrapping or things overlapping, right? So we didn't want that. Okay. So I have totally broken this, right? Where I am now, I have a broken website, and where I'm putting stuff on top of each other and people are complaining, right? Not do that. So careful, right? So don't inadvertently do that, right? So oops, there it is, right? Now we can choose both left and right, right? We can choose left and right. And so typically you would say, wait a minute, that makes no sense. How can you set both the left and right? Right? They're opposites of each other, right? Well, actually, no, you can reuse this. You can reuse both of them, right? And the behavior is to stretch the content. Is the reason blue box overlaps over yellow because it got executed last. Oh, yes, that's a great point. Yeah, let me show you. Let me discuss that bottom. Yes, the order in which these things are rendered, right? That's this determines which ones render on top of what. So, for instance, if I switch the order of these paragraphs, right, they'll end up in the same location because I am overriding their location. Well, actually, I haven't overwritten the location of the yellow one, right? So it'll be in below, right? I'm changing the blue, right? And it'll overlap whatever it is that was declared earlier. But the point that our colleague is trying to make, right? Let me put this back the way it was. Is that the reason the blue box overlaps the yellow and not the yellow overlaps the blue is because of the order in which they were declared in the document, right? So the last one gets rendered after all the other ones. So we call that document order, in the order that they were declared in the document. And you can override that. You can say, now that things are on top of each other, not only do you have x and y, right, but now you have depth, right? That certain things are closer to you, right? And other things are behind other things, right? So now not only can you control the bottom, left, top, top, bottom, left, right. Now you can control the z. So for instance, here you can change the z index, right, to be, say, 100 or 1,000. And z index, z index yellow. Huh? Why are you not taking my z index? Z index 1,000. Huh? Why are you ignoring my z index? Okay, I have another example that we'll take a look at it. You can in case so in this case, how do we create boxes without overlapping? Do we get the px value by trial and error? Yeah, no. So this is just pointing out the fact that when you start overriding the default location of things, you might end up with these kinds of things, right? That maybe you meant to do that, right? Or maybe you didn't. But if it does happen, then you need to be able to fix it, right? Either not changing the position or setting and configuring the z index so you decide what things are rendered on top of each other. Okay, so no, it's not an error, right? This totally supports it. It's whether you meant to do that or not, right? Okay. Sticky headers. So yeah, so you can change also the absolute position where you can change where things appear on the screen, not relative to the self, but relative to other parents, right? That allow you to say, right, I want to position myself absolute to the document. So the document has a the top left corner here is 0, 0, right? And then from there, I want to measure where I want to put myself, right? And you can do that with the position absolute. Position absolute allows you to say, okay, well, I want to move from my left, I want to push off 50 pixels, and from my top edge, I'm going to push off 50 pixels, right? So I go down. So it's kind of a little bit unintuitive, right? If I set my left, I move right. If I set my top, I move down, right? So it's a little bit unintuitive. That's what it means, right? Now, if it's absolute, yes, I'm positioning myself according to the 0, 0, right? But if I start scrolling, the content just scrolls with me, right? It scrolls with the rest of the page. This is in contrast with the fixed position. Fixed position allows you to put stuff fixed on the screen, right? And it won't move, right? It won't budge, right? So for instance, this size and position, we could say class, style, a position, fixed, right? Oops, fixed. And then we can say that the left is 100 pixels, and that the top is 100 pixels. So now this size and position, now notice that if I scroll the screen, right, this front, it won't move with the rest of the content, right? It's put there, right? And it's oblivious to what other things are doing, right? As opposed to something being declared as, oh, oh, okay. So, okay, notice the Z index, I was applying it to, oh yeah, no, okay, yeah. So notice that the blue is rendering on top, right? Okay. All right. So it's putting it there and it's not scrolling with the rest. So this is very useful for implementing things such as these headings at the top. See that? For instance, this where I'm scrolling, right? I'm scrolling this, but it's not forcing the scroll of that menu at the top. All these menus are stuck right at the top of the screen. So just like in a pair here in this document, right? If I scroll, these headings are stuck, and the way that behavior is achieved is by using position fixed, right? And then get stuck to a particular location. Okay. All right. Yeah. Z index allows you to change the relative depth, right, of elements based based on a Z index, in which order you want them to render. Okay. All right, so let's take a quick break. We'll come back, and then we'll discuss some other CSS content, and perhaps we can have time to introduce the second assignment. All right. Okay, so we'll come back right after these messages. All right, let's keep going. Yeah, so we can change the override the look and feel of the default style sheet, right? The color, the size, the position, and we can also configure the where the things end up pushed out to the right or pushed out to the left, or with a behavior we call float or floating, right? And so floating is a mechanism that was initially intended for images, right? That we wanted to be able to embed images in our documents and achieve these kinds of styles. So for instance, in assignment 1 and assignment 2, I use a lot, a layout where the content, right? Or there's some images that are they're kind of like we wrap content around. So for instance, you have all these images, right? And notice this image here, right? So this image here, basically it's kind of like pushed to one side, right? Like kind of like to the right-hand side. And then the rest of the content seems to float around it. See that? Notice if I move this document, look, the text kind of like floats around. Oops, kind of floats around the text. Like here now, it's kind of to the left, and the text just floats around on the right hand. Just flows around on the right. So we call this behavior images are floating to the left, right, or floating to the right. Here is floating to the left, and this one is floating all the way to the right. And then the rest of the content just floats, just flows around the text, right? And so you achieve that by using CSS floats, right? So for instance, we can demonstrate this here. Right, let's remove this position here. Let's remove that. Right, and so let's create lots of content here. So let's and not necessarily paint it in any particular color. Yeah, so let's comment that out. Let's comment that out. And so here you have a paragraph. Let's create quite a several other so that we can so here we can make the paragraph a little longer. I want a lot of paragraph content so that I can show you text just flowing around that paragraph. So there, so we have a very long paragraph, and let's insert an image, right? So let's SpaceX Starship, and let's look at a couple of images, and maybe I don't know, this one, and maybe we can open image in a tab. Is that image there? Okay, it's JPEG, so it's a JPEG. Actually, no, it's not a JPEG. So I'm just going to take a screenshot of this. Let's take a screenshot of this. And then I think it saves it to my local file. And my desktop, I think it's putting it under Mongo here. So we have is this a screenshot here? No. Today. So it must be this one, huh? There we go. So let's call this Starship. Oh, it's PNG, so it's .png. And we can move this into our local file system under a directory, maybe call it images, folder images. And we can move this in there, images. And then we can just show it here in the images. So IMG. And then we can say, source, images, and then starship.png. There we go. So we load that in our document. It's a little bit too big. It's a little bit too big. So let's set the width to be 100 pixels. Okay, so there it is. So it's maybe 200. There we go. And so notice that this image it's behaving inline. See that? It's flowing with the rest of the content from left to right, from top to bottom. Right? If I move this image and I put it, I don't know, somewhere in here. So let's put it in here. Like that. Notice that it's just flowing, right? Notice that the content ends here, and then just continues the image, and then the text continues, right? But it's in line with the content. So float, you know, if you apply float or an image, like you say style and float, say to the right hand side, right? Notice that it makes its right edge, right, just stuck to the right hand side, right? And then the rest of the content just kind of like just flows around the image, right? So that was the initial intended use of float. Float it to the right, or you can float it to the left as well. Both of them work, right? Stuck it to the left hand side. So somebody took this idea and says, ooh, I wonder if we could use this for something else, right? Because notice what happens if I do this to several images, right? So take this image and I do it again, and I float 3. See what happens? The images wants to kind of like stack one after another, right? They're stacking from left to right. So it says, ooh, wait a minute, this could be used for rendering rows, like columns in a row, right? Very much like what we do in tables, where we declare a row and you have multiple columns, because not only images can be floated, but then now anything can be floated, right? Even paragraphs. So if you have a couple of paragraphs, so say I have here one paragraph that has lorem ipsum, and then you have another paragraph. Right, so these are the 2 paragraphs, and so let's just paint them a little bit so we can distinguish which ones they are. Let's say we have a style, and this is background color, light beige. So you have this beige paragraph. We have this one, style, background color, light blue. You have these 2. Obviously, they're behaving like blocks, right? And they're adding the vertical spacing. But if you make their widths, right, to be maybe half the screen, say, right, and then you make the other one also half the screen, okay, and now you float them. Now you float and you say, okay, we're going to float these. Don't say float left, right? And I float the other one too. Notice what happens, right? They're stacking, right? They're stacking one after another. So you are basically reenacting, right, the behavior that you would get with table rows and table columns, right? It allows you to render things that are in rows and columns, right? In a horizontal layout, as opposed to the default block vertical layout, right? And then so this idea you can take it even further, right? You can start thinking of different layouts, right? Let's copy that again. We have a couple more down here, but then you can have it be 20% and this be 80%, right? Where you have like a left-hand side sidebar, and you have and then you have the main content on the right-hand side. But notice what happens to everybody else, right? Everybody else is also wants to float to the left and just wrap and flow around something that is being floated. And maybe that's not what we want, right? We actually want these to be separate, right? And not have the float behavior continue, right, even below the rest of the content. So like this, we don't want this, right? We still want this to behave like a block, right? And so to fix that, we need to. So when the 2 columns are the same size, then you don't see that, right? But in this case, right, where one of them is so much smaller and taller than the other one, then it causes that weird wrapping, right? So what you need to do is, if you want to go back to the original block behavior, right, where you add the vertical spacing and you stop this flow and wrapping around the content, is that you have to clear the float. Is you have stop floating, right? So one way that we can do that is we can wrap this thing in a div, right? And so that doesn't fix it. So we can clear. We can say style clear both. Actually, no. You can add it at the end here. Sorry, this div here. There we go. So we clear it so that you don't have the you go back to the behavior of a block element. Okay. All right. Yeah. So the way you can also if you're going to have lots of these, a lot of these multiple rows and columns, right? For instance, you can have several of these like that, right? Notice that they're not wrapping weirdly. So these are behaving, these divs and these paragraphs are now behaving, this is behaving like a row that has multiple columns, right? And they have a whole bunch of columns in there of different sizes. So we're having the same, the same layout that you would achieve with a table, but without a table, right? So that's the beauty of this. Obviously, you can have other layouts where you might have 20 or several sidebars, right? Maybe one sidebar on the left and sidebar on the right, and then in the middle you would have the main content, right? So you have a left sidebar, main content, left sidebar, main content, and then right sidebar, right? So there's different types of layouts that you can achieve, very much like what we have here, right? Here, we have this sidebar on the left side that's kind of like taking 20 or 30% of the width of the screen. Then you have this sidebar on the right that's taking another 20%, and then you have in the middle kind of like the remainder of the widths of the of the columns that make up this entire row, right? So yeah, so now we have an alternative of how to do this without the tables, right? And this assignment asks you to revisit the assignments so that you rewrite the layout, right? So that it no longer uses table, instead uses these mechanisms. Okay. And we'll see that Bootstrap implements classes that achieve these layouts, right? Using row classes, column classes, right? And we'll see how that works a little later. Okay. So now an alternative to this, an even better alternative, is to use Flex. So Flex is a more modern solution to float. Yeah, so the clear, what it does is that, the question is, what does clear do? So if you have several of these, right, and each time, inside you're floating, you don't want the behavior of floating, right, to go beyond the area that it was intended to manipulate, right? Like what we had earlier, that the content afterwards was wrapping, inside, the columns that we had before. So we wanted to clear and says, okay, well, stop the floating, go back to its original behavior of everything behaving like a block, right? Taking up the whole width of the screen, right? And not flowing around the content. So stop the floating. So that's what the clear does, right? And if you're using it in multiple rows, right? Clear is basically behaving as a row, right? And we'll see that Bootstrap uses this strategy, right, to lay out contents in what they call the grid system, right? And we'll see that a little later. Yeah, so a better alternative. So floating can be used to put block down. Yep, exactly. Like inline, exactly. So an alternative to this is to use flex, is another, I would say, a more modern way to achieve an inline behavior, is to use the display flex, right? So for instance, if you have so for instance, we say, let's talk about flex. So H1 flex. If you have a div, right, where you have several paragraphs, say, so you have here lorem ipsum, you have several of these, so say you have 3, okay. So the way this behaves, you already know, right? You have three divs, 1, 2, and 3. Maybe let's change the color so that we understand that they are separate, right? So this is a background color. So we'll do aquamarine. It's that one, the first one. This one, style, background color, and we'll do corn silk, this one in the middle, right? And do this one maybe light gray. And background color, light coral. Because we have those 3 colors, right? And so, yeah, and they're behaving like block elements, like you would expect. But if you wrap them inside of an outer div, a container div, right? And you can set the style to be display, right? The default display type is block, right? It's behaving like a block, adding vertical spacing, taking up the whole width of the screen. But you can change it to flex, right? And this automatically converts this into a kind of like a row and a column, right? Now, this one's looking a little bit too nice, and because they all have the same content, right? So it doesn't necessarily look that way right away. So for instance, here's an example that we have here where you have just smaller pieces of content, right? So for instance, let's choose another one. So we have div, and you have a div here, where you have box 1 here. We have a box 1, and then we have a couple more. This is a box 2, and we have a break. And the intention here is that we want to make it a little bit longer than the first box, and also a little bit taller. So let's create 2 rows, just to show you that how the different sizes affects the behavior of flex, right? So here's a 3rd box, and here we have 3 columns, presumably. We have BR, and let's do this again, right? So that, like that. Okay. So the way this renders in here, there they are. First, we have box 1, box 2, and box 3. And I'm deliberately making them each one a little bit wider than the other and a little bit taller than the other. Can you explain how is flex different? Yeah, that's what I'm explaining right now. Yeah, flex is a more modern, deliberate attempt at creating horizontal layouts, whereas flex is a hack. All right, it was just like misusing tables for layout. Here, they were misusing float, right? That was meant for images, right? And to achieve the same thing as tables, but without misusing tables. They wanted to leave tables alone for their intended use. So float was a nicer way of achieving tables without misusing tables. And it was a CSS solution, right? It was not using HTML to accomplish this, right? So it's outside of the HTML document. You can manipulate this outside, using just plain old CSS. Right? But Flex is deliberately designed, right, to be able to lay out stuff, horizontally, vertically, right, and manipulate how is it that you want to render things horizontally, right? So let me show you, right? So again, let's come up with a couple of colors, right? So we'll do here style, background color, and we'll do light. What do you have? What light blue? We'll do another one here, style. And background color, light coral. And this one, we'll do style, background color, light green. Okay, so we have those three. And they are rendering like the default display block. And you can see that by default their display is set to block, right? Which causes it to, if you hover each one, notice that it wants to stretch out to take up the entire width of the screen, and nothing else fits to the left or to the right, causing everything else to be vertical, right? Add vertical spacing and push down everything underneath. Yes, right? It's the default block behavior. Now, you can override this by wrapping this and setting the display, right, to be, by default it's block, right? The display is block, right? So this doesn't change anything because the div was already blocked, right? The parent div was already blocked, so I haven't done anything. Notice that I'm overriding it with something that was already blocked, right? So if I override it now, I'd say no, I don't want block, I want flex. This immediately causes it to flow horizontally like that. See that? But it's a little bit different from what we see here, right? Let's add some spacing here because it's kind of like looks stuck, right? So let's add some vertical spacing here, break it a little bit. Okay. So a couple of things. Notice that they're not all the same width, right? And I did that deliberately, right? That's why I created these, box one a little narrower, and then box two a little bit wider, and then box three a little wider, just to illustrate, right, the fact that now the divs are behaving like inlines in that the width is determined by the content. Before, the width was to stretch out the entire width of the screen, whereas now the width is entirely determined by what's inside, right? So if you have more stuff, it'll be wider. Now, by default, also the heights are all the same, right? Regardless of what's inside. Right? So notice that behavior, right? That the width wants to be as wide as the content, whereas the height is as high as the tallest, right? So notice that box one and box two, right, want to be as tall as the tallest box in the container, right? Which is very convenient, right? Because we saw that the other examples here, right? Notice that using float, notice that this one wants to be taller because it has much more content, whereas this one, notice that it's not as tall as the other one. So you would have to create additional CSS to make sure that these two are the same height, right? So there's more work that you have to use using float to achieve that these two are the same height. Okay, otherwise you have this weird empty space in there, right? So let's keep going. What else can you do? Also, another thing is that notice that there's this space kind of like empty on the right hand side. It's left empty. It doesn't stretch to fit the remaining content that is left entirely empty, right? Which we can fix. So yeah. So let's keep going. Oh, so this goes from here to that, right? They are all like, kind of like floating lefts, right? But not quite, because the height is different. But you can change other things. You can change the justification of these child elements, right? And center them. So for instance, in here, right, I can say that I can justify the content from being to the left, right? I can justify them to render in the center. So notice that now they are in the center. This would be not so complicated, but using regular CSS, you would have to use margin auto, right? Make sure that the content inside is smaller than the parent, right? And margin auto then kind of centers the content in the middle. But it's so much easier. You just justify center, or you can justify it all the way to the end. So you can say end instead, right? And so if I reframe and notice that it justifies this to the right hand side. Notice that the value here is not right, it's not left, it's end. See that? And that's because it's using a more generic term, right, about right and left, because right and left is can be can have different meanings in the cultural context, right? For us, the right hand side is the end, is the right hand side, but in a different culture, the end might be the left hand side, right? Because content might be read from in our culture, or at least in U.S. English is written and read from left to right, from top to bottom, but Arabic and Hebrew, or Chinese or Japanese or whatnot, they might have different orientation, right? From right to left, from top to bottom, from whatever. So different languages have different meaning of what a particular direction in which you follow the flow of the content, right? So end, right? For us, the end is on the right, the end is at the bottom, right? Whereas in other cultures it might be different, right? So if this renders in a different geographical area, instead of things being to the right-hand side, they might actually be rendered to the left-hand side, because the end is the left side, and for us, the end is the right, okay? So anyway, you'll see a lot of CSS, right, using this terminology where they won't use right and left. They'll use start, they'll use end, okay? And not use right and left. So anyway, you can also justify the space around. Right, so we can change this to space around, right? Or change the space between, like that. Okay? And then so notice that the center stays, but then the other ones are justified to the left and the right. And finally, there's also evenly, where there's equal space in between each one of the items. So anyway, there's quite a bit of other things that you can do. In particular, right? If you say, for instance, space evenly, and then you also specify the alignment. Alignment allows you to justify is horizontally, whereas alignments you can align them vertically, right? So for instance, you can set the alignment to the start, and that is interpreted as the top, right? And so because it's aligned to the top, now the vertical spacing means something, and because certain one of these are taller than others, before they were taking the same width, the same height, right? Because there was no vertical alignment. But now, because we're adding vertical alignment, height has a specific meaning, right? So now in this case, we don't by default, default the height to the tallest one. It's whatever height we would need to fit the content inside of us, right? So notice that now we're all at the top, right? If we were all the same height, you wouldn't even see this, right? They will look the same, right? And you can also do flex start. You can say flex end, right? So now they're at the bottom, or start end, and I think there's like start and center. You can say center. There we go, center, and center them around the center base. Okay. You can also change the children, so that they take up as much space as they can, right, with the same width, right? So for instance, by changing what's called the bases, and so if we remove this, the alignments, right? If we remove the alignments, actually let's leave that alone. Let's just copy this content and play around with a different copy of this. So we have two of these, and let's put a break in between. Break here, and yep, let's put a break right there. So we see that they're separate. Here, if we remove the alignment, and we remove the justify, but then, so this is we're back to where we were before. But then inside of each of these, right, we change the flex basis 100, right? And we apply that to all of them. Right. Notice that they all want to stretch and take up as much space as they can, and it evenly spaces out all of them, right? And then you can start playing around with percentages as well for each one individually. Okay. Now in the assignment, we do give you another one here that is very useful for when you start playing around with Canvas, right? And let's see, is there flex? Yeah, this one where you can create these columns, right? So let me show you. Right, so let's put it in here like that. And these classes, let's declare these classes here. The container, right, and put it in the index, and let's paste in there. Right, so this one allows you to, and let's put a break between so you can see the how this lays out. So notice that this is declaring 3 columns. So 3 columns, column 1, 2, and 3. It's declaring a row container, flex row container. Let's take a look at the declaration of that. So this is declaring the display to be flex, and we can change we can set a particular direction. Instead of, it could be a column or a row, right? And then these here, the last one, we're configuring it so that it can grow and take up the as much space as is available later. So if we remove it, right, it behaves like we had before, right? We had the 3 flex divs, right, that take up as much space as is defined by the parent, what's inside, right? But then we can configure one of them to take up as much space as there is remaining, to fill to grow and fill the space, right? Which is this flex grow, flex grow 1. You can configure how is that you want to grow and fill in the remaining space, right? So this is useful this is useful for implementing things such as this, where the sizes and the width of the left-hand side columns is fixed, right? And then the width of the remaining columns is changing, right? It's growing left and right, to take up the remaining space to the right of that one big row, right? So that should be useful for implementing that kind of behavior. So anyway, so let's now let's go over the assignment 2, right? So you can get started at least with the lab part, right? And so that we can come back later next week and discuss Bootstrap and libraries in general, right? And how they can be used to create some basic styling and then override it to look more to what we need, right? So let's take a look at the assignment. So like all assignments, they have 3 parts, right? Where the first part is the labs, right? And they are intended for you to practice some of the basic skills, right? Which we went over today. So the selectors, changing positions and widths and colors, right? So that's those are the labs, and then you're asked to use those skills, right, to implement an application that we are working throughout the semester, and which is the Canvas application. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to revisit, right, the screens that you built in the previous assignment, right? And you're going to make an effort to make them look closer to what the screenshots suggested, right? And then the last section is continuing some of the work you had started in the previous assignment that is only applicable to graduate students. Okay, so the labs are meant to somewhat go over some of the material about style attributes and style tag, right? The style, using the style tag, right? And then using the link, right? So giving you a chance to practice and see that it's you get the same effect, but the link is the preferred way to go, right? And so asks you to remove the style tag, right, and use the link instead, right? Then goes through several examples of selecting specific items in the page, and then painting them red, blue, white, foreground white, whatever. And so it asks you to create both the index file and the CSS that targets the specific DOM elements, right, that you declare in the HTML. So first, it goes over the ID selectors. So a selector that uses the hash, right, to identify or pick out items that have an ID, unique identifier, and then practice with class selectors, right, that use the dot to refer to elements on the right hand on the HTML, right, that uses the class attribute, right? A quick question about the lab, specifically about 335. Is it a typo to also copy the code to index.css? 335. Oh my God, 335. 335. All the way to the bottom of the left. 335. 335. Okay, maybe it's faster here. 335. Stacking icons. Is this right? Is this to practice with stacking font awesome, copy HTML and CSS code below to the end of and save. Refresh browser. What do you mean? Copy. Is this what you were referring to? So I'm just giving you the code here, right, which you're gonna copy into this index.html that you've been working on in the multiple labs, right? And you're gonna paste them in your HTML document, right? And it should render as is shown on the right-hand side. Yes, it seems to work when you just copy it to. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. No, of course, yeah, you would not copy this into index.css. I meant if I am giving you index.css, if I'm giving you CSS, you would copy that into index.css. You're right. I'm not giving you any CSS here. Yes, very good. Yes, I'll remove that. Good catch. Yep. And I guess here too, I'm not giving you any CSS. Good catch. Perfect. Thank you. Here either, right? Yeah, in all the other exercises, I was giving you sample CSS as well, and that's where the copy paste error, right? They always catch us. Yeah, let's go back. Where was I? Yeah, selecting IDs. You can then select by classes. You can also do selectors. You can combine classes and IDs and names of the elements, right, to create fairly complex, fairly complex rules or pattern matching rules on the left side. So notice that here's the curly bracket. See the curly bracket? And so everything to the left is a kind of like a regular expression, right? And what the browser does, that it uses that pattern match, right, to to iterate over the nodes in the in the DOM and see which nodes or what combination of nodes match this rule. And so what this rule says, so this one says, well, there are two classes. There are two classes. One is called WD selector 1, and this is WD selector 3, right? And there's a space in between. See the space? So the space creates a relationship between these two classes. It says, hey, there's an element that has a class called WD selector 1, and there's another element that has a class that is WD selector 3, and one is inside the other. So 3 is somewhere in the body of the selector 1. So the 1 is an ancestor, right? Is a parent or great parent of W selector 3, right? Or the other way around, right? W selector 3 is a child or a grandchild, right? Or great grandchild, right? Of this one over here. So that's what the space means, right? That there is a one is inside the other, right? And there could be any generations down the line. So here's W selector 1 here is this one right there. So this div with this class, whereas WD selector 3, it's somewhere, it's this paragraph inside a div, inside another div, right? So there's a hierarchy there. So does it match? Yeah, there is a paragraph of that class that is inside, somewhere inside the parent of 1. Okay. Why do you need these CSS classes relationships instead of just naming separately? Oftentimes you have these structures, right, and you want to be able to navigate right through a file system, or just like when you are manipulating files in the file system, right, and you want to target and you want to delete certain files but not others, right? Or you want to rename certain files, but not others, right? And then so you specify, right, the location, the hierarchical location of, these directories, these files in these directories. I want to rename them, but not other files in some other directories. So same thing here, right? We can navigate the DOM, right, and specify exactly which elements in a particular branch, right, that has a parent and a child and whatnot, right, a specific name. So same thing here, right? You can create relationships so that you can navigate the entire data structure of the DOM and refer to specifically which elements that have specific arbitrary attributes and structure. Okay, so this one instead says, see this greater than establishes parent-child relationship, direct descendant. So for instance, this says that I'm targeting a node 3 here who has an immediate parent 2. Right, so this one has an immediate parent. So it's that one. It can't be some other one that might have a, some other ancestors in between, right? It has to be somebody who's an immediate child, right? So that's what greater than allows you to do. So you can establish immediate descendancy, right, between the. So again, these on the left side are pattern matching relationships, regular expressions, right, that allow you to navigate the DOM, and specify exactly which elements you want to modify. Make sense? All right, excellent. So yeah, so practice that just to get you going and understand some of that syntax. Styling color, background color, foreground color. Also notice that all the classes that I asked you to create and work with in this assignment, notice that I have pre-penned them all with WD. See that? And it stands for web dev. Okay. And so that's a good practice to follow, especially if you're part of a development team, right, in a company, that you want to be able to distinguish classes that belong to you or to a course or to an institution, right, and distinguish them from classes that you might be using from third-party libraries like Bootstrap or Font Awesome or Tailwind or whatnot, right? And so a common practice is that if these are classes that you are working on that belong to you, that you wrote, right, you prepend them with something that gives you a clue that these are yours and they're not somebody else's classes, right? So I want to establish the requirement here that if you are creating classes for this course, right, they all should start with WD, right? WD dash, all right? So so I certainly followed this requirement. Box model, right? We talked about that. Margins and paddings and corners, right? And styling positions, right? Relative and position absolute and fixed, right? So I ask you to implement that and play around with Z index. Then we play around with floating stuff, right? So you get to practice, play around with that and create different layouts using floats. And then a little bit of flex, right? Okay, so 326. Just information for us to know, or should we also be implementing some aspect of this lab? 326. 326 bootstrap. Yeah, no, you don't, right. There's no exercise for this, right? It's just a FYI. Yep, very good. So yeah, so in Bootstrap, which we're going to cover a little later, maybe next lecture or next week, right, is one of several libraries, right, that professionals have been creating and developing for quite a while, to make it easier on us to make things look pretty. Because we could learn all the CSS we want and practice it, and after a while you'll realize that it's not easy to use CSS and make them look pretty and presentable and professional, right? You really need an artistic eye to make things look pleasing. And so there's folks that have been at this for decades, right? And it's their career to make things look pretty. And so even though we're going to learn how to write CSS and read CSS and edit CSS and whatnot, right? There's no way we're gonna compete with these folks that make things look so spectacularly nice. So instead, once we understand the CSS language, we are going to use one of these libraries, right, that already allows us to very quickly apply some classes and that have already been configured to make things look consistent and pretty and have nice white spacings and nice margins and padding and whatnot, right? So we're going to be using Bootstrap. For the project, you're up to use other libraries. In particular, I'd love, if some of you would consider using Tailwind to practice, especially if we're doing React.js. It's a great library to learn, right? So we're going to be covering Bootstrap a little later, and you can learn about some of those classes, styling tables and forms and tabs and pills, and then at the end, right, you're going to use all this knowledge of CSS and Bootstrap, and you're going to revisit the navigation sidebars. You're going to restyle them to look like this. It doesn't have to be pixel perfect, okay? But you should shoot to be as close as possible, right? So I do give you some leeway, right? That the width should be around 75 and 85 pixels wide, right? There should be some padding around the text, around maybe 5 and 10 pixels. You get to choose. So it doesn't have to be pixel perfect, right? And the font doesn't have to be pixel perfect. So you can use something like Arial or Verdana or something like that. But definitely not the Times New Roman out of the box. And so also you should style the second sidebar, right? Navigation sidebar, which is the account navigation and the course navigator, right, to be red on white, right, with the selected hyperlink anchor, highlighted with a border on the left-hand side, right? These icons don't have to be exactly these icons. I'm asking you to use Font Awesome as icons. And so there's no perfect match on the icon. So if you find something that looks like a calendar or something that looks like a notebook, right? Or something looks like a account profile user icon, then use that, right? So make a reasonable effort at making it look somewhat like this, but again, it doesn't have to be pixel perfect, right? So you're going to style the profile and the edit profile. I encourage you to use Bootstrap. Bootstrap, gives you a baseline look and feel that already gives you some nice styling for headings and form elements, and then you can override the coloring so that instead of using the default blue on white, it becomes red on white or black on white, right? Or black or white on black. And so we can override that. So you're gonna style the edit profile, and I give you some requirements. They're fairly generic requirements, kind of like trying to steer you towards trying to make it look like this. But again, I'm not expecting you to be pixel perfect at all, right? But you should make a reasonable effort at you shoot for what you have there. And there's a new screen, the dashboard screen, right? When you click on the dashboard, you get this kind of like these cards, but these cards are responsive in that as it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, right? In the widest you get 4 columns, and as it gets narrower you only get 3, then you get 2, 1, and then right? And then it's block, right? Takes up the width. Now with Bootstrap, this is trivial, right? It's very, very easy. And we're going to cover how to do that, right? Also, the course navigation screen is also going to be responsive in that, at its widest, it's showing all 4 columns, but as it gets narrower, right, you drop one of the columns, as it gets narrower and narrower, you drop the navigation sidebars on the left side, and then you get these 2 buttons at the top, right, that allow you to do the navigation, so that if you click on this, right, then you get this separate screen that allows you to navigate to the dashboard and account and blah, blah, blah. Or if you click on the right-hand side, you get the course navigator, right, that allows you to navigate within the course, right? But then when you widen it, right, it becomes again, right, these 3 columns, and it becomes at the widest, it's 4 columns, right? So we're going to learn how to do that. Bootstrap has quite a few classes that allow you to implement this kinds of responsive behavior, hiding things or showing things depending on the size of the screen, right, that appear and disappear, right, as the screen resizes, right, hide stuff, show stuff, right? And there's classes that are dedicated for that, and we'll learn about that come next lecture, or maybe the next lecture after that. Assignment screen, right, you're just going to restyle it to look like this. The edit screen, you're going to restyle it. Grades, right, you're going to restyle using the tables, right, using Bootstrap tables, and it allows you to very easily Bootstrap generate these kind of like striped tables, right, that allow you to style them so that the odd number rows have one color and the even number rows have a different color, right? So they alternate the background. Again, that's trivial using Bootstrap. Graduates, it's very, very simple. It's just, go back to your settings and, those 2 tabs that you were asked to implement in the previous assignment, and then just style them to look the way they were shown and the screenshots that we gave you there. I'll probably copy the screenshots here just for convenience, but they're in the first assignment. Try to make them look as they are described in the previous assignment. Do all your work in branch A2, right? So that you don't override any work that you might have done for the previous assignment. Okay. All right. Yeah. So that's all I had for you today. So in the next lecture, we'll work some more topics on CSS, and we'll probably introduce Bootstrap and get you going on the second assignment. We'll style a few things together, right? We'll link Bootstrap, and then I'll show you how you can override a Bootstrap, right? So that it looks more the look and feel of what is it we're striving for in the Canvas project. Okay. All right. Any questions? All right, let's see. When will the grades for the first assignment? Yeah, so we just started grading that. So, I mean, it is due tonight. Some folks have already submitted them, and so we'll start grading that. It should be done by the end of this week. Why not integrating all the styling inside one class? Why not? Wait, what? Why not integrating also called what inside one single class? Oh, yeah. So that's what we discussed earlier, right? That there was 2 schools of thought, that you either have very simple utility classes, right, that are very generic, and then you combine them to achieve the look and feel that you want. That's one school of thought. So using these BG color blah blah blah, then it's the the utility classes, and then you have the other school of thought where you have these fat classes, right? These very very descriptive classes that describe the role of a particular piece of elements, right? And then in there you would have lots and lots of transformation and properties that then style it to look like a heading or list or whatever. And so I'm not taking any sides in this philosophical battle. Tailwind is very much the utility approach, and then you one of the criticisms of that approach is that you end up with very verbose classes where you have to apply like 10 15 different classes to achieve one particular look and feel, as opposed to creating a class of your own and then collecting all those transformations in them one single class, right? Whereas if you have the role, then you're stuck with these names that as you start moving things around, right, and those names no longer apply, right? So now you have to go back and rename those things, and if you want to keep the same style, and so it kind of creates a dependency with the existing role, with the existing structure of the document, right? That makes it less easy to move things around and refactor, right? And be nimble about and again, it depends what kind of application you have. Something that changes a lot, right? That makes no sense to create a structure because it's only going to be for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, or is it something that is more long term and changes very slowly, right? That you might use one or the other. And can I adhere to the second school of thought? Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I'm not forcing you to use one or the other. I'm only letting you know of the of the why one or why not the other. And when will the quiz be out? So the quiz will be posted on Thursday. Will be made available on Thursday for, I think, for 3 days, I think, or something like that. Can we have something like a nested class, like class 1, some CSS, class 2, and then class 3, class 1, class 2 element? Well, no, not in CSS. Although there is a SAS which allows you to do those kinds of things, right? It allows you to create a hierarchy of CSS, like nested CSS, which uses a lot of the object-oriented notions of inheritance, of aggregation, of abstraction, and so it's a compiled CSS, right? That a parser parses SCSS and it generates the equivalent CSS, but CSS by itself does not have that. But SAS and less do allow you to create functional CSS, right? But I'm not going to cover that. Sorry, I have another question for. Do we need to refer to the required reading for preparing for the quizzes? Not for this one, but in an upcoming in the midterm exam and the other quizzes, yes, you do have a few questions, theoretical questions from the book. All right. All right, excellent. Thank you. Second school thought, sure. All right, everyone. Good night.